Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the final episode of the Science Stuff podcast for this school year, 2022. I'm your host, Ethan Vargas, and my co-host is Daniel Buddha here. How you doing?
Amazing as always.
It's great. We have our a swordsman-like moderator and his skill, Mr. Og. How you doing, Mr. Og?
Thank you. Good, I guess. Wow, that's a different introduction.
Yes. And then our guest today is our old co-host, making a special appearance, Mr. Joe Nowak. How you doing?
It's going pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm great. It's great to have you back.
Yeah, it's nice to be on again.
It's great. So the topic of today's episode is fencing, which Joe Nowak knows very well. I heard that did you go kind of far in like some kind of finals or state even?
I at one point was ranked second in the Midwest for, I think it was 19 and under. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, I've made it, I think, almost top 100 at national tournaments, but I have a decent amount of experience. I think I've been fencing semi-competitively for 7 years now, I want to say. So I have a good experience with the sport, and I think there's a lot of really interesting parts about it.
That's really great. And so since this is the science podcast, we'll talk about the science behind fencing. And to start, one thing that I kind of saw was that like fencing is apparently like a really fast sport. And in the Olympics, it's like, I think the second fastest defense sword, which is the foil, correct? That's how it's called.
Yeah, I think the saber, I think, is the second fastest. I think the statistic is like the tip of a saber blade is the second fastest moving object in the Olympics, next to a bullet.
Yeah,
so
which is insane. Do you think you've ever maybe gone that fast or experienced that fast, or is that kind of like even above you in the Olympics, do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like the way that they're able to move at like Olympic level, it's definitely, I would say, a lot faster than what I'm used to. And also I do foil and not really saber, which is a little bit slower. But actually, honestly, it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I think if you ever heard of the flow before, flow in sports,
like the movement of not really. Have you? No.
So it's a specific phenomenon that's in sports where athletes find that time somehow like moves slower for them in like competitive environments than to like what you're watching. So while it may seem like it's moving like ridiculously fast, you're like, how can people react to something like that? What it turns out is that like I think time kind of like moves slightly slower for people who are actually in there. So, and I've felt like I've definitely felt something like that before, where it's, in the moment it doesn't really feel that fast. I feel like I can react to stuff, but then I look back, I'm like, how on earth am I like reacting to stuff that fast? So
yeah, that kind of reminds me of like baseball, kind of like when you get a hit and like somebody hits the ball at you and you almost react like instantly, and you're like, how did I even react that quickly?
Yeah.
So, I guess
that's happened before, in soccer, other sports like that. That's really good. That's actually really interesting, and that you've experienced that, and we have in some degree.
Yeah. No. So yes. Now flow is like a super, honestly, it could probably be its own like super like topic, but just the idea of like time relativity being like slower for people who are in sports is just, I don't know, like it's such a deep, and like if you do like a quick search on Google, you would find like a bunch of articles, kind of talking about it and stuff. So I recommend looking at that up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What's the difference between a foil sword and a saber?
So the foil blade is it's right, they're both designed for kind of like two different purposes, right? So the foil has a trigger at the end of its tip. And so the way is that when you have like two foilists fencing, they both have conductive lames, or like conductive like metal vests that are hooked up to like a box or a receiver. And when they're fencing and they have these like two little triggers at the end of the blades, when it comes in contact with one of the lames, it completes a circuit, and then that gets sent to the box, and that's how it triggers like a point, or it knows that they got a touch.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I had no idea that it was that intricate as to how they did it.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting, because also like how much has progressed. Like, I think it's actually why they all wear white, because back when it like started, or I think it was during the 16th century is what I saw, was when it was banned or something. So people ended up having illegal fencing bouts. So in order to score, it would be like first blood. So the way that they tell if you bled is because you had an all white vest, and if you start bleeding, it would show. So that's how the scoring was. That's how originally like the all white uniforms were conceived.
Right.
And
They
then
don't do it anymore, right?
they
Joe?
don't do that
Right.
anymore.
You do not get into any underground fencing bouts, right?
No, no.
Right.
No.
All right.
Yeah. And then as that progressed, I think I forgot how later it was, but what they end up doing, because right, bleeding is probably not the most effective way of telling if someone scored. What they end up doing is kind of similar. They have a cotton swab that they would put at the end of the blade, and they would dip it in ink. So then when you would hit someone, like it would leave a mark on the vest. So it was very easy to see when someone hit or not. And then you would have like 6 different referees there who would be determining who got the point based off that. But now that all has been simplified into just a box with triggers at the end of the blades. And then kind of comparing that to saber, the saber blade actually doesn't have a trigger at all. Instead, the entire blade is conductive. So what happens is that you hit them with any part of the blade, and it goes off, right? And that's the difference between the two sports, right? Is foil, you have to only hit someone with the tip of the blade, and specifically the torso area. Whereas in saber, it's entirely their upper body. So their arms, their head is all part of it, but they can also use any part of the blade, which is why it's so much faster in saber compared to foil, because there's doing like all these like super elaborate like slashing motions.
Yeah.
Joe, can I jump in real quick and ask 2 questions? So you said that the scoring is different on the two. Are the blades themselves different, is my question, or is it just that the scoring is different? And then my second question, for our crossword puzzle fans, how does an épée fit into this? And is that a fancy way of saying one of those, or is that a third type of fencing?
Épée is, I'll just go to the épée is actually, it's a third type. Yeah, no, that's it's the third type of fencing, which is actually the simplest, where it's kind of like foil was just the end, but it's your entire body. So your entire body is it's not just your upper body, and there's a lot of different rules about like whose point it is based off like how they're moving and stuff. But in épée, it's just if you get hit, you get a point. If you both hit, you both get a point. So it's the simplest to watch and understand, and kind of what makes it like the slowest pace of those, because it's you don't want to give up any kind of leverage. But in terms of like how the blades are, right? Because in saber they're doing a lot of slashing motions, so because of that, it's actually a much more flexible blade compared to the other two. They also have compared, maybe just not the blade, but they also, if you see, they also have bell guards. All the blades have different bell guards.
Yeah.
And the saber one has one that covers your hand slightly, because your hand's also a target, so that has to be accounted for. And kind of allows you to have like a bigger target to parry as well. But the blade itself is much more flexible compared to the other two, much lighter as well, because it's much more elaborate motions in saber compared to the other two. Like the foil is kind of in the middle between epee and saber, where like the epee one is much more stiff compared to the other one, because your actions in epee are much tighter compared to saber, because if you do a big elaborate motions, you're giving up a lot of like target area right here. And since there's no like priority or anything, right, that's an easy way to like lose a point. So those blades are usually much more stiff because you don't want to, you're trying to have like a stronger control of those like small actions, and also make sure so that they don't break as much. Foils do unfortunately break a lot, and I've had to pay a fine penny for many of those. But then
It's not expensive.
oh yeah, they can fetch a fair price for the good quality ones. Is my only real complaint with the sport, to be honest.
Sounds like that one really cuts deep.
Yeah, that hurt. But yeah, then the foil kind of in between, where you are kind of doing slightly more elaborate motions, but since you're not using the entire part of the blade, it's not as flexible. Which is the long-winded answer to.
It was a good answer for sure.
Yeah.
So there's one article I saw about fencing is like why you should yell and scream in fencing.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of reasons, like to release tension, to gain your confidence back. It combats nerves, out of pure celebration, to play mind games, and to also influence the referee.
Oh yeah.
So I know for one of our past episodes for Science of Sports, we talked about bowling with Austin Kennedy. He talked about how his mind is also part of how he does well and performs. So you would say it's the same thing for fencing, right? Like your mind is kind of a big factor.
Yeah. No, it's fencing has often been compared to chess with swords, right? It is a very, very big kind of like mental game between the two,
Yeah.
right? Like in fencing, it's like you have to know what action you want to do, be able to execute the action you want to do, and to keep like that distance between. So it's kind of figuring out like what your opponent wants to do, what you want to do is a huge part of fencing, probably more so than like honestly the execution part.
Gentlemen, do you think we should start allowing people to yell out during like tests? Reduce stress, increase confidence. Those
Yeah.
sounded like things that would help people during tests.
I think so.
I don't know about influence the teacher.
Well,
Yeah.
if you guys ever do the Wise Aces competition, if you keep yelling that test, it could also play into the fact of offsetting your opponents.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
just be like, yes.
Yeah,
They'll be like, oh no, they know all of this.
exactly.
Oh.
No, but honestly, the yelling is such an interesting part because you're not allowed to really speak at all during the bout. Like it's a, even if you want like the referee to like call something or like to review something, you have to go like this because you're not allowed to talk to the referee usually. Yeah.
Strange.
So you kind of, you have a lot of like, right, when you're, like pent up or frustrated, that's a good way, like just talking or something is a good way to alleviate a lot of that. And since you're not allowed to really talk at all during, while you're fencing, it could not, yelling kind of like allows you to kind of just get rid of a lot of that anger and stress in like a short amount of time, because they do allow that. It is yelling is allowed, but talking is not. I don't know.
So
Honestly, we need some like smack talk. I think that should be allowed in fencing.
maybe in the underground fighting rings they have
Yeah.
that.
So, yeah.
Do you ever yell during your matches, Joe?
Oh yeah. I am a big yeller. It's just I'm a pure adrenaline fencer.
Well, that's
I
good.
fence so much better when I have adrenaline in me, and just yelling is a good way for me to kind of build that up. But it's also really because you talked about how to influence the ref. That's actually very much true. And a lot of times the actions or whose point it is very hard to see. So if you have one person that yells and one person that doesn't, I would say like 90% of the time they're giving it to the person that yells.
Gentlemen, isn't that kind of true in soccer too?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
I mean,
dude.
soccer gets a bad name for people, quote, taking dives, which does happen. But also a lot of the time, if you're fouled, you won't get the call if you try to play through it a lot of times.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is definitely a tactic that everyone. So you see, like, if you go to the Olympics and you watch any fencing bout, any action that happens, both are yelling for sure, because they don't want to. If someone doesn't yell, they're definitely giving it to the other person.
Yeah.
So it's almost a requirement to do after every point.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I kind of had a question for you. Like, I was thinking about just like fencing in general, and how do you really practice for like matches? What do you usually do?
It's I don't think it's really different than like other sports. A lot of it just comes with constantly just playing against other players or other fencers, right? I think just being able to kind of like practice actions and like if you usually kind of do like go on one-on-one sessions with like coaches, and during that they'll they'll teach you like what actions to do, kind of correct your form and stuff like that. So kind of getting that your like point control and controlling your blade, right? That's one whole part. And then when it just comes to like just game knowledge and like kind of that whole more like chess side of fencing, right? That just comes purely just from like fencing other people and getting practice in. Which brings up another interesting point, which is the presence of lefties in fencing, because it may be like other sports where like being a lefty is maybe in like baseball or soccer, where it can be annoying to fence a left or to go against a lefty, where like it's like slightly different to what you're used to, but it's usually still manageable. In fencing, if you think about it, right, right, they kind of have their bodies face towards each other. So if like when you're fencing, you have if you're right-handed, you have your right foot forward, your left foot in the back, and then your right hand extended. And lefties, it's the opposite way. So if you can imagine yourself going up against a lefty compared to a righty, it's an entirely new set of target areas you have to go for, especially in like in epee and foil as well. So the practicing against lefties is probably like huge, right? Because there's so few of them, but also it's like honestly there's probably like a lot of them in the actual tournaments. So if you don't have that matchup experience against lefties, then it's almost like an entirely different sport at that point.
Yeah, that sounds pretty difficult. I think I had two questions. One, how did you like get into fencing? And then two, I've seen like on like competitions that I've watched just a little bit of fencing, like some players, especially like the Olympics or like national competitions, they have like their face masks have like I think lights in them.
Lights?
I thought that was a thing. Maybe
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think right, like when you're I think it might just be for like it's when you're fencing someone, you can't really see because you have the scoring box is usually off to the side, so it's hard to kind of see the target area, or like if you score, unless you can hear the noise, it's usually kind of hard to see like the box. And like so sometimes you'll hit, you think you got touched, and you turn around to see the box, and it turns out you you end up didn't, and then the other person just kind of just extends and gets the point. So I think what the lights on the mask do is that it allows you to kind of see if your opponent got a point or if you got a point without having to kind of turn to look at the box. So
Okay.
and
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then in terms of how I got into fencing, it's actually not that big of a. I honestly just saw it in a bulletin, just like a park district bulletin. It was like, hey, come try out fencing. And I'm like, sure, why not? And I went, and I loved it, and I've stuck with it ever since.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I wish like it was more of like a common sport. Because I saw it during reconciliation this year in the spring or the winter. In the gym, they have those like the state champions and such. There's in like 1970 something. There was like this guy who like for 4 consecutive years went to state for ND for fencing, and that seems really cool.
Oh yeah, ND has had I think they've had a quite dominant past record in terms of fencing. Yeah. I think there might have been like an accident or something, which is why they didn't stop it anymore. But But yeah,
maybe you could come back after some time and maybe be a coach, Joe. Start up a new program, go to state.
I think Shea Boyle, because I think my dad was talking to him, he was possibly thinking of bringing it back. I don't know. I didn't hear it from me, but
that'd be so cool.
Maybe yes, maybe no. You could
maybe
say
yes.
He's kind of on the fence about it.
Oh God. Okay.
Gentlemen, because of time, I want to jump in real quick with a question. Now, Ethan and Daniel, you have to mute yourselves because I want no outside influence on this. But it feels like as this is the season finale, it feels really only appropriate to end on one question, right?
Okay.
And Joe, as you are a master of combat, right? It feels like we have to. Joe, have you been listening to the podcast at all this season?
I listened to the Dylan one.
Okay.
I think.
Cool. Ethan and Daniel, do you know where this is going? Okay. So Joe, if you had to, I need vindication here. I need to know, right? That it has to end well. And I hope they didn't tell you about this. Joe, if you had to fight a dinosaur, what type of dinosaur would you take on? And I'm going to lose my mind if you say the same thing that they've said.
Any dinosaur?
Oh, no texting and don't. Nope.
Any dinosaur. Am I just going like mano-y-mano?
Yep.
Okay. It's just one.
It's just one. That's right.
Okay.
It's just one.
It's just one.
I know this is great listening for the listeners, but if people have been listening, they will know that this has come up. Joe, we did an episode about dinosaurs, which is when this originally came up. I invite you to go back and listen to it.
Okay.
And then somehow they have tricked me into every time we've had a guest, it has come up in some way. They have carefully planned it, right? So that it comes up. So I feel it feels appropriate to end on this.
Got it.
We went to the Field Museum, right? And we even talked about it there. And we walked up to this dinosaur and I said, really, this one? And they said, absolutely. I said, you're taking on this one. They said, you're darn right we are.
Going to the museum actually validated it more.
Yeah.
And then also, just before Joe answers, I think we could give him a fear factor. Since he's done so well and he was like second in the Midwest, I'd say he's a fear factor of, I think, 9.5.
Oh,
yeah.
That's good. That's true, Joe. At the museum, they had fear factors for in the oceans exhibit for how terrifying things were. And so we've been giving some things fear factors. That's a good point. 9.5. That is fierce.
Is that good? Is that good?
Oh, almost as good as a giant turtle.
Okay.
It's better than the giant turtle.
I think the giant turtle peaked at 6.
Yeah.
No, there's like something that got a 9 that was like weird. That got a 9.
I don't know if that one was a turtle though.
Yeah,
I think it was something weird, but it wasn't a turtle.
Okay.
Okay. So Joe, you've got it. You've got a fear factor of 9.5 out of 10, and you are going head to head with a dinosaur. And the type of dinosaur that you are going to go head to head with as a 9.5 is
assuming I'm not going against like like a little baby something, right? Like one of the, right?
Just
can I?
answer. Just answer.
Can I say that? Can I go
Just-
one against one of the little ones?
You can, yeah.
I don't know
you
what they're called, but what are the little ones called?
Oh, like the tiny
Yeah.
dinosaurs.
Just answer, and then we'll say why
Okay.
we're losing our minds.
Okay. If I can go against one of the little ones that's like this tall, I'd probably do that.
He's
If
talking about the
not,
ones I think Kyle talked about.
against one of the bigger, more notable ones, I wonder if I could maybe a pterodactyl, because they got like hollow bones.
No, that's
right.
No, but they
Probably.
can pick you up. Those ones are actually. I wouldn't want to fight one of those.
Yeah, no.
That
And
one's
I
just-
feel like if I could get one good roll in, right, like a Dark Souls roll, like miss one, and they miss me, I'm
He
on
has
that
fencing
thing, right?
skills. He has
Like that
fencing
thing's
skills, too.
not taken off if I'm on
Okay.
top of it.
Gentlemen, do you want to
it's
fill him
right.
in on
Yeah,
what
what
your
did you
answer
guys
was?
Okay. So our answer was a baby triceratops.
Baby Triceratops.
Originally, it was just a triceratops, and
Yeah.
it became a baby triceratops because that was more realistic. Because then I was saying, even if it's a baby one, it's still kind of big, and you get like a shield afterwards.
Yeah. once
Okay,
you
I didn't
get-
know the baby option was.
That's what Mr. Ogg said.
Can I fight a pterodactyl still in the egg? Is that an option? You know.
Maybe you can raise it and then fight other pterodactyls with it once it grows.
Joe, can I at least get some backup here that trying to take on a triceratops is outrageous?
Yeah. No, I don't.
No.
I don't know how.
But if it's a baby
Yeah,
one,
but it's a baby.
But if it's a baby one, but I didn't know the baby. I didn't know
Well,
that argument existed.
Gentlemen, I think we are out of time for
Well, yeah,
today.
that
But
was a-
like I said, it felt like it just had to end with that.
it was a great way to end it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a great last episode of at least my career. Hopefully, we can come back eventually. Maybe all three of us. Maybe at
Mhm.
the same time at different points, but that'd be great, Mr. Ogg.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for listening, and it's been a great experience being a co-host for the Science Stuff podcast. I think you'd say the same, right, Roberto?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Joe, it was great having you back,
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
and thank you, Mr. Ogg, for a great year. Thank you, everyone.